Good morning, everyone. John471 here to discuss the S&P 500. Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Allow me to read our disclaimer. Derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Okay, we're looking at the CT news calendar. What data do we have? Well, at 9 a.m. we have Goolsby speaking. At 9:30 we have Musalem and Waller. At 9:45 we have the S&P Global Manufacturing PMI flash. 10 a.m. new home sales. And going further into the day, we have some announcements out of the Treasury, including a 5-year auction at 1. And we have the Beige Book at 2. Musalem speaking at 2:35 and Hammock after the bell at 6:30. So that's what we have for our scheduled news. Let's take a look at some charts. Here's the S&P 500 daily bars, RTH only with daily profiles. Let's look at the weekly first just to be aware of that, to carry the narrative forward. So what happened on this weekly? Last week we put in an inside week, and it was kind of a big deal because I think that we were really, a lot of participants were really looking for the high. We got right to there, and then we couldn't get it, and we released lower. I called a lot of attention to this low, where I was basically saying that we have this high. This is the important high that we're aiming for, and if we can't get that, we're looking for this low if everybody is off sides. And that's exactly what we did. We got that low, and we found pretty quick reversion back into the prior week's range. Let's switch back to the daily profiles. And the reason I want to switch to the daily profiles here is to just to highlight this. Once again, I keep talking about this 4-9 day, but it's very important. We're within the range of it. This area right here is very important. You see what happened here is this was just panic. No one knows what's going on. Are we going to just crash forever? What's the situation? And then right here, this is where a quorum of participants, buyers, dug their heels in and then had the benefit, or maybe foresight, who knows, of the news coming out and ripping higher. So this area is really very important. We couldn't ever retest it, and we have this space of unauctioned area that is just it's like a there's actually something in physics about where pulling something apart and then a space emerges between them, and that's really what has happened here, where there's a very tight balance, and then we just erupted higher, and now there's this space left, this unauctioned space that we tried to retest. Now, when we tried to retest it here, notice there wasn't an excess. This is where there were a lot of many willing sellers, but more willing buyers, and so we have this this battle that erupted higher once again. So we see that this area is controlled by the buyers. We checked it again, and still looks to be controlled by the buyers at this time. So now we're reverting higher. And we have regained, as I mentioned, we've regained the prior week's range. So today is Wednesday, and the big question then is, okay, well, we tested lower, and we've regained the prior week's range. Are we going to hold this prior week's range for the rest of the week? What areas of structure are important? Well, here's the thing. If the prior week's low is the floor, then we obviously have this area of unauctioned prices to check, which we did overnight thanks to some news. We'll get to that. But anyway, and so if we're able to get through this, then once again, we might start to talk about these highs. I want to highlight that these 2 days are very important. These 2 days are like the other side of what's going on here. We have this area, like I said, controlled by the buyers. Now we have this area controlled by the sellers, and we're just banging around, boom, 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 trying to figure out who's going to flinch. I don't have the answer to that, but we can plan for contingencies. Why don't we do that? Let's glance quickly at the full session chart just to be aware of what's going on there. So here's the full session chart. The reason I'm showing it to you, we had some news came out after the close and reopen. Basically, the president softened some comments on Powell. He basically said he doesn't want to fire Powell. He just wants him to be on time, something of that nature. You can check your CT news feed for the exact comment. But for me, the wording isn't that important. Just the fact that we had a bullish reaction to it. Side note: a lot of this news that seems to rally us seems fairly flimsy to me. But I'm not. That's not my specialty. Decoding news, decoding markets is. Anyway, so what's important here? For me, what I'm looking at. Let's get a color that'll show up. So this week was an inside week, as we mentioned. We took out the low, and now we've recovered. But looking at this week, it's a very clear double distribution weekly profile. And this upper distribution are these 2 days that I mentioned are important. And we see that right here, we're actually above this LVN. So we're noting that. And this LVN for me is potentially going to end up being support. We'll see how it goes. But that's one possibility. But if we hold this area, if we hold this LVN and we push higher, then obviously our ultimate target will be the high of this region. And if we start to fall back into this unauctioned area, then we'll look for the high of this day. Let's go to a smaller time frame chart and plan more specifically. Okay, here we are on a PNF intraday chart. This is a 1.5 point by 4 PNF. Let's discuss some ideas for the day. We are going to start with bullish ideas. And the reason we're going to start with bullish ideas is because as you can see here, we have pushed above this gap zone. So for me, just generally speaking, the most bullish idea would be if we open and we hold above this gap zone or test and reject prices for this in this gap zone. Thus holding open the gap that we have for today. I want to mention also very quickly, when we had been trading up here before, I really highlighted this day. So, this is an overnight profile. Let me get a color here. This day, because for me, this was a pretty significant fight, even though it happened overnight. And then what happened was we tested above and then just released lower from it. You see right here, buyers tried to kind of step up, and we flushed through and came back, and then they tried to step up again, and then we had this further push. And this is kind of like somebody's sick and they're like dry heaving. It's like, ugh, they heave, and then one more big heave, and then that's kind of it, and then they're okay. And then they just kind of pick their head back up and start to, maybe stand up and get back to the bar. I don't know. But regardless, so we see the sellers push, and the buyers just kind of keep stepping up, and eventually we're back in the prior week's range here. So the reason I'm talking about that is because this area, this fight area is also very important to me, which we have pushed above. But regardless, we'll go on to ideas for today. Bullish ideas. So the most bullish idea for me is definitely if this overnight low holds. And really, if we either just keep pushing from where we are now, or maybe we get a pullback ahead of the open back into this gap zone that shows support and gets back above. Now, there are zones that will help us here. Let's take a look at them. These zones I pretty much put these zones here specifically about this day, because we pushed higher after this news. We held this area, now we're pushing. So for me, like I said, if we hold, even if we test back into this gap zone, as long as we reject and we get really above this 20 zone, then I will be looking for the overnight high. Now here's the thing. So the overnight high would be the first target if we're able to hold above the overnight low and test in the gap zone and show support. Now, if we get the overnight high, this zone, this is an important zone, and I am expecting there to be sellers present. So I am thinking if we have excursion today, my thought is it will be a grind into this zone. So we hold on any pullbacks where we keep going. We get into this 5450 region, a key zone. As long as we're able to keep getting new highs, I'm open for higher prices. And the next target would be this zone, this 84 zone. This is an important one. I'm expecting a lot of resistance. If we continue on this trajectory, and you know, the mood of the market is buyers, but if we continue on this trajectory and hit the prior week's high, I mean, that'd be a pretty interesting move to completely, you know, open the week below the prior week and just rally straight to the prior week's high. So I would expect there to be sellers here, and I would expect this to be, even though the bias may be very clear, a really tough trade. Now, there, as I mentioned, there could be sellers, and we could see an impulse lower that starts to take everything away. I will be going by this day, these zones right here. Meaning if we start to push higher, I will look at these areas as potential support, and we would have to crack back into them and not be able to get out for me to consider a structural short. Continuing higher, you know, if stops really go off and we get past this area, I would expect us to obviously start to fire into this zone, our 5522 zone. And if we're above the prior week's high, if we get above the prior week's high today and start to make progress, then it's going to be runners only for me. I'm less likely to initiate unless the context really supports. But if we get through the prior week's high, this is the obvious target, the 4.9 high. And if we're moving through that, I'll just go zone to zone for gap mid and gap close. And that is the idea. If we hold this area and potentially hold on any pullbacks, although if we really have that many buyers in here, we might not get that pullback. Let's talk about bearish ideas. What are the bearish ideas? Well, if we test above this zone, take the overnight high, and then get rejected back into this area, and it looks like that pullback that I want to trade, but then we start to push higher, and all of a sudden we don't get that initial high, which means everybody that bought it here is not doing so good, and then we start to go lower, and then everyone that bought it here is really not doing so good. Then what we may see is some reversion into the overnight low. Now here's the thing, if we get below this area of buying, we take the overnight low and we don't immediately lick check and show support, then I would be open for continued reversion lower. I'm not really expecting this, but yesterday I said I wasn't expecting the rally, and we got the rally. So, you know, that's why I plan for stuff I don't expect. That's why you should do the same thing too, because, you know, what you expect doesn't always happen, or what looks to be the most expected thing at this time may not be the most expected thing in an hour and a half when the cash market opens. So you need to be ready for everything. But anyway, so if we lose this area in the way I kind of mentioned, I mean, is it possible for us to not take the overnight high and do this? Sure. We need to see sellers really kind of come in strong, but I think it would be likely for us to at least tag the overnight high. And then the thing, like I said, we get the overnight high, we get pushed back into the gap zone. Everyone that buys the pullback starts to get in trouble, and then we take the overnight low. If the overnight low is not a lick check and we just can't get back, then we're looking zone to zone. And what's the key target? Obviously, it's gap close. What happens if we close the gap? Well, if we close the gap, there's always potential for us to find the buyers that kind of got left behind when there was nothing available to buy here. So we might see a lick check that starts to revert higher out of the gap. But if we don't, if we fall into the prior day's range, then we're looking for the POC, we're looking for the prior day's settlement and all of those prices. If we start to really lose this, then I'm just going zone to zone. What's my primary expectation today? I'm thinking that this low is likely, the overnight low is likely to hold, at least initially. How likely am I to be right on that? 30%. That's why you have to be ready for everything. That's what I got for you. I'll tell you, like I said, we don't know what's definitely going to happen, but I know the pieces that I'm going to be aware of in my trade. That's this area right here, which means this zone and this zone. And then if those two things, if we don't find the buyers and the continuation that is possible in that area, and we lose this area, then I will be open to lower prices, potentially gap close. To me, that's the second most likely scenario. And what could be our nothing day? Let's discuss the nothing day, because that's a very high probability here, because in my opinion, what we're seeing is a market where everybody wants to buy it, but the risk reward is starting to go, because this gap zone was really the target. Like if buyers are going to show up here, then everybody would have loved to get on the trade to target this. That trade is gone. So now what could happen? We could have buyers and sellers. We could have the people that didn't get long yet contending with the people that were already long. And what could that mean? That could mean that things just get really choppy, where we start to take the low, then look like it's that lick check, but then we get up here and we can't really do anything. Maybe we even push to this 54.84 zone, but then just fall back. Be very careful, because there is a strong possibility of a nothing day if we just want to hash out the fact that we have made it back up here after falling below the prior week's low. That's a strong possibility, because to just go from to just engulf the entire prior week, that's a less usual thing. So to me, I'm very open to the possibility that we kind of have a bullish tint to the trade, but it just doesn't get this high, in which case that would be a nothing day and we'd look outside in. All right, that's 16 minutes. I'm somehow just getting longer at these. Sorry about that, guys. Our goal is to trim these, make them around 10 minutes, and ideally to include crude oil. But I'll wrap it up here for now. I hope this is useful to you. I hope you're having a wonderful morning. I hope your wonderful morning continues. If you do find this useful, please like and subscribe, and tell a friend if you have a friend that also trades or just likes to talk about the S&Ps. That's what I got for you today. Hope you're having a wonderful morning. Hope your wonderful morning continues. And I hope you find a way today to improve your trading that is not dependent upon your P&L, but is dependent upon your process. That's what I got. Let's get out there and clock those ticks. Ciao.